BoogeyMan band coming round the bend. Is BoogeyMan band. Is BoogeyMan band.
Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends, and thanks so much for dropping by the Horror Zone channel. I hope everyone's doing well. This is a very special video, one that I've been working on for a couple weeks now. It's actually a planned sort of series of videos that I'm going to be doing on television shows that I grew up loving. Ones that I just sort of feel like they're getting, lost with time. People don't talk about them as much anymore. And the first one I'm going to be talking about, it ran for 3 seasons from 1987 until 1990. And it is, of course, Friday the 13th, the series. So I have all 3 seasons on DVD. I've had them for quite a few years, and I loved this show growing up, but I wasn't a huge fan of it right away. As everyone knows that has followed my channel, I grew up a fan of the Friday the 13th franchise. I loved Jason Voorhees at this point. And a year before the Friday the 13th television series started, Jason Lives had come out in theaters, and that was the movie that really just... that was the one that defined my love of that franchise, and I adored that character. So I was a huge fan of Friday the 13th, and reading Fangoria magazine, I remember reading something that they were going to be doing a Friday the 13th television series. Now, at the time, I said, oh, that's awesome. It's going to be a Jason television series. And of course, if you read the article that was in Fangoria, it said, no, this is going to be title only, nothing to do with Jason. So right there, I was turned off from it. I didn't want to watch the show. At this time that I read this, I was 12, 13 years old. I was not interested in seeing a Friday the 13th television series without my favorite antagonist, Jason Voorhees. And I remember seeing like the commercials for it and things like that, but I just didn't want to watch it. I didn't watch the show for several months after it aired. And I remember that at one point I caught the end of the episode involving the Cupid. I remember being sort of fascinated by it a little bit. And of course, Louise Roby, who played Mickey Foster, I noticed her right away because I was a 13-year-old kid and I thought she was gorgeous and hot. And I said, who's this hot redhead? And, I started watching the show. And I remember what really drew me to the show, and it might sound silly now, but was the fact that once they got the cursed objects, they couldn't destroy them. They had to put them away, and they had this vault that was in the basement of the store that they would store all these cursed objects in once they collected them from the owners. So that right there interested me, and from then on I started watching it. And I started watching the first episode I remember watching all the way through was the one called Dr. Jack, which deals with the scalpel of Jack the Ripper. And from then on I was hooked, and I watched the show all the way through to its conclusion in 1990, and I didn't know it was canceled. It's something I'll get into more as we get into the 3rd season, but for now I want to talk about the 1st season. One thing I also want to bring up is this amazing book, and you can see I have all my notes in it. I actually got this book back in 2015, and I read it immediately, and it's written by Elise Wax. But this is a fantastic book that goes into all the details about the show, and there's going to be excerpts from each season that I'm going to talk about from this book directly. I'm also going to give my top 10 favorite episodes from each season. So I hope everyone looks forward to this, and here we go. It starts with you finding out that there's an antique dealer named Louis Vondrady, who's played by R.G. Armstrong. He's made a pact with the devil to sell cursed antiques out of his shop, Vondrady's Antiques, in exchange for wealth, power, immortality. In the show's first episode, The Inheritance, he's tired of being merely an obedient puppet for the devil. Louis rebels against the devil and breaks the pact, thus being killed and having his soul claimed by the devil for it. After Louis's death, his shop is inherited by his niece, Mickey Foster, played by Louise Roby, credited without her first name as just Roby, and her cousin by marriage, Ryan Dallion, played by John D. LeMay. They decide not to keep the store and sell off many of the cursed antiques before they are stopped by Jack Marshak, played by Chris Wiggins. Jack was Lewis's friend and retired world traveler and occultist who originally collected many of the antiques for Vanity before they were cursed. The series follow the protagonists as they hunt down the cursed antiques, which are usually in the possession of people who have discovered their magic powers and are unwilling to give them up. In some cases, the object is the possession of the one who originally discovers its magic power, the inheritance, what a mother wouldn't do, while in others, Tales of the Undead, A Cup of Time, Vanitys Mirror, Read My Lips, The Mephisto Ring, The Prisoner, another person has learned of the object's power and obtained it before the object is recovered. Since the cursed antiques are completely indestructible, they must be locked away in a vault beneath Curious Goods. The rechristened antique store is designed to magically render the objects inert. A manifest written by Lewis holds the records of all the cursed objects sold by him. Frank Mancuso Jr. Mel Harris, who used to be head of television at Paramount, came to me and said that he wanted to create a Friday the 13th television series. They had a great deal of success in syndication with Star Trek, so they were looking through the sci-fi horror catalog saying, what titles do we believe we could get traction on that have enough name value that it wouldn't require sizable casting or a lot of advertising dollars spent on making people aware of what the show is. As at the time, I felt as though I'd kind of done Friday the 13th and I wasn't really interested in revisiting it. I felt like it ultimately was limiting how people perceived what I was capable of doing. So I said, yeah, I really don't want to do this. I don't watch television, so I don't think I'd be very good at making it. I've made these other films and people are finally starting to put that Friday the 13th thing behind me. Now all of a sudden I would be jumping right back in the middle of it. Then there was the obvious part of it, the certain limitations of what you could put on television. Friday the 13th movies are known for certain scenes of real aggression, and that would be a real limitation if you brought it to television. He basically said, look, we really want to do this and you are really the only person who can do it. I don't care what the show is, just call it Friday the 13th. You make it anything you want for an hour and we put it on the air. I told them I get it, but I don't want to do it. My dad, who was the chairman of Paramount at the time, said, look, this is a real opportunity to do something you've never done before. Theoretically, they can sell this thing. So I said, it can be anything we want. He said, absolutely, because it is in syndication, you aren't going to get a lot of notes. You aren't going to get a lot of structure from us. You are just going to get a budget from us. Then you can go do whatever the hell you want. So we started thinking about the Twilight Zone and how that had common elements that were bound thematically, but they weren't necessarily a traditional series. We started riffing off that, and that's sort of how it all got going. Tom McLaughlin, director and story editor. Right after I finished Jason Lives Friday the 13th Part 6, Frank Mancuso said, you know, there's this guy who came in who was talking about doing this as a series. I said, a weekly thing with Jason? He said, no, it's like with cursed objects and stuff. I don't know if it's going to work. I said, why the title? He said, meh, we own the title. It was my second feature film, and as far as I was concerned, my career was doing features. I wasn't interested in signing up for a series. That was kind of the end of it. Then the conversation swung over to Jason versus Freddy. We started talking about that back then in 1986. That went nowhere because New Line wasn't going to give up Freddy. Rob Hedden, writer-director. I was hired as a story consultant 1 month before season 1 was scheduled to go into production in Toronto. While there was half a dozen or so scripts already written, they needed various degrees of polish to make them as great as possible and set a consistent tone for the series. I ended up revisiting the first 4 episodes and tossing in my 2 cents on several others. Though the writing credit deservedly went to the original writers, in exchange for being story consultant on the initial episodes, I was able to write several episodes of my own and direct one of them. I ended up writing 4 and directing 2 before shifting to writing and directing Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Fred Mullen, composer. I was still pretty new to the game. I had just gotten the Kurzweil 250, which was a really wonderful instrument, which was miraculous for 1987. Gave me a keyboard with built-in digital recorder and sequencer. Great sound samples of real strings. I had to do a demo of music inspired by the script that I saw. It was probably about 7 minutes long. An idea for a theme song I did on the Kurzweil. I made a cassette of it and listened to that and other pieces. I was driving in my neighborhood in Toronto and church bell chimed. I was listening to my cassette of the theme, which was pretty close to what the final theme was. Then the church bell hit at the right time, and it was sort of eerie. It worked like a charm. It was in the right key, and I went home and added a tolling bell at the end. It was very fortuitous because I think it really caps the theme. Louise Roby, Mickey Foster. The callbacks were on Pico Boulevard, not anywhere near the Paramount Studios. I showed up very late. I was the only one there, and I went in and I did my bit. Next thing I knew, my next callback was on the Paramount lot. That was interesting because I had never been in the Paramount lot. They told me to park under the big blue sky, and I thought they were making fun of me, but it turned out there was a big blue sky painted on the side of a building. I finally find this one bloody office, and there was Frank Mancuso Jr. and his father, Sr., who was the head of Paramount. It meant very little to me. It was lucky I was so naive. I did my readings, and oddly enough, I did them with John LeMay. He hadn't been cast yet, but they were looking for people to pair up. So we went behind a dumpster and rehearsed our lines. Then we went in and did them. That led to another callback. It was still us two, which I found to be unusual. After I had done the audition, I got a great big wink from the casting people. It was a couple of days and I heard I got the job. The news went around Hollywood because, as it turned out, it was a huge job to get. John LeMay, Ryan Dallion. I remember getting behind the dumpster and rehearsing with Louise before our callback. It was just a dumpster sitting in the corner of the lot. 2 or 3 callbacks, and I worked my tail off rehearsing the scenes. Then I think they actually offered it to someone else, a guy who had just done a series of 7-Up commercials. He turned it down. Lo and behold, I get a call at my apartment that I was to fly to Toronto the next day. I hadn't heard it from anyone but this wardrobe person who called me. She wanted me to come in for my fitting. I go, what? Okay. So I called my agent, and yes, indeed, I got the part. They offered me the role, and the details had to be worked out, but that was the plan. Then it all happened really quickly. The next week, I was in Toronto. Frank Mancuso Jr. Chris Wiggins was like the emotional and spiritual anchor, but the truth of it is, as Chris was cast, it was easier. We always knew he would sort of ground the show in a way that I thought was important. The guest stars were more the sexier parts, for lack of a better word. They were the ones that had the most fun associated with them, because the Roby LeMay parts were more the procedural aspect of trying to get the thing back, so Chris kind of grounded it. Then there were other protagonists that were out there trying to save the world from whatever it was that was being unleashed. Then you've got the guys who are making the deals with the devil, who were the more fun people to watch. They are the ones benefiting in some real way from the implementation of the device. Jim Henshaw, executive story consultant. Chris was a really great guy to work with and write for. He was a really bright, old-school English-trained actor. He had a classical theater background. You could give him anything, and it was a lot of fun to see what he would do with it. I remember having many discussions with him where he would ask if he could try it out this way or that. John was kind of a method actor. He came from theater, that sort of thing. Real quick study, whatever you gave him. Roby wasn't really an actress. She was more of a singer and had done a lot of modeling before. She was very instinctive about everything she did. Whenever you talked to her about scripts and things, she always came at it from a very emotional, instinctive way. Rob Hedden. We had tremendous freedom to brainstorm all sorts of cursed objects. Generally, an evil artifact was the springboard for each storyline, but character relationships were always crucial. If you didn't care about Ryan, Mickey, and Jack, the jeopardy would be pointless. Having memorable antagonists was essential too. The beauty of the series was that not everyone who acquired a cursed artifact was pure evil. Quite often there was a moral dilemma. While this conflict gave the show more depth, there's no denying that the de facto hook was the antique itself. Our mission was to be as creative as possible in their selection as well as utilization.
So my top 10 for season 1 of Friday the 13th, the series. Number 10 is going to go to episode 8, Shadow Boxer, directed by Timothy Bond. This one was released on November 21st of 1987. It deals with a cursed pair of boxing gloves, and the story pretty much deals with a broken down fighter who gets in touch with his dark side. He acquires, he steals the boxing gloves and uses them, and how the boxing gloves work is that they allow the owner to win in the ring while his animated shadow beats someone to death. This was one of the first full episodes of the show that I watched, and it was a repeat because I didn't watch it until early 1988. And this one gave me a little more insight into Ryan as a character, and I really, started to see that he had a love for comic books. There's a couple of lines in the episode where he talks about comics, and you see him reading a comic at one point. Also, my crush on Roby, Mickey Foster, was getting, I just thought she was one of the most gorgeous women I'd ever seen, and I liked her character as Mickey. I also thought that David Ferry, who played Tommy Dunn, was really intimidating, and there's a couple of moments in it that he was truly frightening. Also, I loved the special effect of the shadow coming to life once you put the boxing gloves on. Like, Tommy puts them on for the first time and sort of touches the wall, and his shadow jumps off the wall and starts punching and sort of walking out of the locker room. It's really a cool effect, and even though I know by maybe today's standards people would think it was dated, but I really loved that, and I just think it's a really great episode, really haunting episode in some moments, but a lot of fun too. Number 9 for me will be episode 13. That's The Baron's Bride, directed by Bradford May. This one was released on February 20th of 1988. And this one deals with a black cape with a diamond clasp. That is the antique they're going after. The cape makes the wearer irresistible to women, and the clasp allows time travel when touched by blood. So the three protagonists, Jack, Mickey, and Ryan, go to this woman, Marie Simmons' house. She takes in tenants and sort of seduces the character of Frank Edwards and bites him because she's a vampire, turning him into a vampire. She attacks Mickey when the cousins and Jack enter the premises. In doing so, she cuts Mickey's face when Mickey tries to go and get the cape off of Frank. His blood and her blood hit the clasp, and Ryan goes to intervene, and all three of them are sent back to 19th century London. The 19th century stuff was really cool because it was all done in black and white. Frank escapes into the night, and they're helped by the characters of Abraham and Caitlin, his wife. It's a really good episode, and I just think it's one of the best they did on the show, and they had some really good effects, some good vampire scenes, some scary moments. So it's a great episode. I definitely recommend it. One of the best of the entire series. Number 8 for me, I'm going to combine a two-parter episode because it really was sort of like a mini movie that aired in the season, and it deals with the Quilt of Haor. So it's the Quilt of Haor, which was episode 19 and episode 20, the Quilt of Haor, both directed by Timothy Bond. The first part aired on May 7th, 1988, and the second part, The Quilt of Haor, The Awakening, aired the following weekend on May 14th of 1988. And pretty much what this story deals with is Mickey and Ryan pose as members of a religious sect to track down a patchwork quilt that is thought to have deadly powers. And how the quilt works is that it lets the owner kill others in their dreams. And the character of Effie Stokes is the one that has the quilt in the first episode. And she is using it to manipulate the Reverend Grange because she's in love with him. And she's kind of using it to get rid of all obstacles in her way, which are his brides to be. And there's some really horrific deaths in this. It's a really good episode. It also, again, I really was starting to really like Ryan a lot, and really just he was just kind of like I idolized him a little bit at this point because I was like 14 when this episode aired. And he ends up falling for the Reverend's daughter, who's already betrothed to be married. She's played by, her name's Laura, and she's played by Carolyn Dunn. And their relationship, the exchanges that they have is I thought it was very natural, and you really like the characters together, even though you know that they can't be together. And there's a fake out at the end where they think they get the quilt back. Ryan decides to stay behind because of his affection for Laura. When Mickey goes back to the store, Jack realizes quite early that it's a fake. So the second part deals with that the quilt is still in the colony, and Mickey and Jack go back to get it and sort of save Ryan, because what ends up happening in the second episode is that Josiah realizes the power of the quilt. He kills Effie and tries to frame Ryan as the mastermind of all the killings that have been occurring. It was a really, really well done two-parter. I really loved the locations that they used for the colonies, and everybody in the cast did a great job. I thought that Kate Trotter as Effie Stokes was haunting, and Scott Pollan, who I've seen in quite a few things, did a great job as Josiah Grange. I really did like Carolyn Dunn as Laura. I thought her and John DeLeMay had terrific chemistry. So great episodes, fantastic. Number 7 for me is going to be Vanitys Mirror. This was directed by William Fruit. It's episode 15. It aired on March 5th of 1988. An unattractive girl, Helen Mackey, played by Ingrid Vinegar, uses a magic compact to make boys who insult her fall in love with her, then kills them to make sure they stop pestering her. And she also uses the cursed object to seek revenge against her sister, who is beautiful, and and she's jealous of her. I thought that the character of Helen was played so well by Ingrid Vinegar. She does a great job of balancing that kind of sort of ugly personality with this creepy demeanor, and sort of a sympathetic, because her sister gets all the attention, and everybody picks on Helen because of the way she looks. So you do realize where this kind of vengeful side comes from when she gets the compact, and it just how it works is that you sort of reflect light from it onto their face, and it makes them fall in love with the owner, but then she has to kill them to fulfill the curse. This episode bothered me the first time I watched it, because one thing, Ryan gets hurt really badly in it. He poses as a high school kid, and Helen tries to attack him using the cursed object on him, and he ends up falling into the boiler room and really hurting himself. And for most of the episode, Mickey and Jack don't know where he is. He's kind of, he's in the boiler room, he's got rats on him, he's hurt, he can't really move very well. And the other thing about this episode that bothered me is that they don't get the object back. The compact is lost. No one knows where it is, but there's a sort of a last shot at the very end of the episode where somebody is picking it up. So that it's going to come back in some form later in the series, and it does in season 2. But great episode. It's still very haunting when I watch it. Number 6 for me is going to be episode 5, Halloween, directed by Timothy Bond. This aired on Halloween of 1987. On Halloween night, Mickey and Ryan are visited by the ghost of their late uncle, who has returned from the underworld. He crashes a Halloween party that the cousins and Jack are throwing at the store because they want to welcome people in the neighborhood who were all in fear of the store for so many years when Vanitys was running it. It's a really good episode because outside of the opening of The Inheritance, the first episode, we don't really see a lot of Uncle Lewis. And that's pretty much true throughout the series. But this was one episode where he played a pretty big part in it. The cursed antique in this one is the Amulet of Zohar. And that can be used to transfer a spirit into a deceased body, as long as the body died of natural causes. So the whole thing is that Uncle Lewis's ghost is trying to use that to come back from the dead, but he has to do it before a certain time. He has to do it before dawn. So it's a great episode. You find out a little bit more about Jack and Lewis's past. There's some really great moments. The antique store looks so cool, decked out in Halloween, jack-o'-lanterns and candles and things like that. And I just have a lot of fun with this, and there's some really creepy moments in this, and R.G. Armstrong just does such a great job as Uncle Lewis. A fun episode. It's an episode that I didn't see until season 2. They re-aired it in season 2 for their Halloween episode, but it's actually the 5th episode of the series. And for number 5, that goes to Cupids Quiver. Directed by Anton Magoyan, this one aired on October 17th of 1987. Jack, Mickey, and Ryan search for a cursed statuette at the houses of a local college. When they finally find it, it's in the hands of a lonely misfit, Eddie Monroe, with an unrequited love for a popular girl. The Cupid of Malik is the cursed antique, and it makes people fall in love with the owner, then forces the owner to kill them. So very much like the compact and Vanitys Mirror. Eddie Monroe, the character of Eddie Monroe, was played by the late actor Dennis Forrest. He passed away at a very young age, at 41 in 2002. He was in movies like The Mask, and he did quite a few episodes of the series throughout its run. He's terrific. He really does have that good balance between creepy and sympathetic, and I just love the way they animated the Cupid of Malik when he's going to, shoot the arrow. It's sort of done almost like a laser effect when he actually shoots the arrow, but he comes to life a little bit, and it's really kind of cool, just his look on his face and everything. One of my favorite cursed antiques from the series, and one of my favorite episodes. Number 4 for me is going to be the first episode of the series, that being The Inheritance, which aired on October 3rd of 1987. This one was directed by William Fruitt. Mickey and Ryan inherit an antique shop from their late Uncle Louis Vondrady. They soon meet up with an old friend of Lewis's named Jack Marshak. He reveals to them that their inheritance comes with a devil's curse. The cursed antique, and this is one of the creepiest, I think, in the entire series, that being the porcelain doll, and goes by the name Vita. And also a really interesting little note is that this was one of the first things I ever saw Sarah Polly in, who's gone on to become a well-renowned actress and director. She just won an Oscar last year for Women Talking. She directed and wrote the screenplay for that, and won best screenplay Oscar. She's terrific in the episode as Mary, and she's all of 8 years old in this episode, but really just commands the screen with this really disturbed little girl. And she has this really sort of doting father who is recently remarried, and her and the stepmom don't get along at all. But it's a great episode, and really I think it set the bar high for, how good the show could be with the right writers and the right directors. My third favorite episode of the series is going to be episode 11, Scarecrow. This was directed by William Fruitt. This one deals with Mickey and Ryan going to a small farming town where 3 people turn up dead each harvest. While investigating, Ryan becomes attached to a young boy who witnessed his father's death. The cursed antique is an animated scarecrow that guarantees good crops after it beheads 3 victims. This is a really haunting episode for me, and I love just everything about it. There's certain sound effects that are used when the scarecrow is there. William Fruitt was probably one of my favorite directors of the show, and just some of the camera angles that he uses, just the isolated feel of this town that they go to. It's really, really it puts me in a certain mood every time I see it. It's got a very kind of haunting, very cold, fallish feel to it, and I love watching it in the fall. I also just love the scarecrow is very, very creepy, and a very different type of thing that you would think would be at an antique store, but it's really, really well done, and almost has a slasher vibe to it, because when it comes to life, it's obviously somebody in a costume chasing people, and it's really, really creepy. Also equally creepy is the character of Marge Longacre, played by Patricia Phillips. One of the most terrifying characters in the entire series. She is so manipulative, and she's the one that's controlling the scarecrow. She tries to put on this like sweet lady vibe, and you just see this. There's so much evil in her, and she really makes my skin crawl in the episode. Also, a really good actor in it is the character of Jordy Mino, played by Nicholas Van Burke. He sees his dad killed at the very beginning by the scarecrow, and Ryan befriends him, and you find out a little bit more about Ryan's past, about his brother's death, and how this kid reminds him of his brother. And it's a really wonderful big brother moment for Ryan, and it was again one of the things that just really made me drawn to the Ryan character. And I think it's got one of the most haunting endings. It always remained one of my favorites. It's such a great episode. I love it. My second favorite episode of the show will be episode 24, Pipe Dream. This was directed by Zale Dalen, and the thing about Pipe Dream that really I responded to is because it deals with Ryan and his estranged father. Ryan's invited to his father's wedding, but learns that his father, Ray, played by Michael Constantine, who people will know from movies like My Big Fat Greek Wedding. He was in My Life with Michael Keaton. He was also in Thinner, that was directed by Tom Holland, based on the Stephen King novel. But he has this magic pipe that Lewis gave to him. That was his favorite uncle, and he gave him this magic pipe, and he uses it to murder his business rivals in this military industry. And what it is, it's a pipe that emits smoke that incinerates a victim. And it's really a great episode because Ryan, the tension between Ryan and his dad reminded me a lot of what my dad and I were like, and still are to this day. I still don't have a great relationship with my father, and this episode just really spoke to me because I understood what Ryan was going through. And this episode was a really personal one for me, and I thought that Michael Constantine did a great job as Ray. He's so driven to be successful that he ends up, selling his soul to the devil pretty much by doing so. And then at the end, he pretty much redeems himself, but it's a very sad ending, and it's still one that breaks my heart to this day. Probably one of the most emotional episodes of the entire series, and it still gets me when I watch it now. One of the best. My favorite episode remains episode 10, Tales of the Undead, directed by Lyndon Chubbuck. This one deals with a cursed comic book, and being a comic book collector as a kid, and really just being in awe that Ryan's character, the character of Ryan, was into comic books and art. That's sort of what solidified this as one of my favorite episodes, probably my favorite episode of all time. Pretty much what this one deals with is that Ryan witnesses an attack by a character from his favorite comic book. To learn more, Ryan tracks down the comic's creator, a bitter man named Jay Starr, who's played by legendary actor Ray Walston, with a vendetta against his former business partners. The comic book is called Tales of the Undead. The character is Ferris, which is this giant robot, and who possesses the comic book transforms the owner into a killer robot. Jack wasn't in this one; it was just Mickey and Ryan in this one, and it was just Ryan on a quest to talk to somebody he idolized, that being Jay Starr, but then realizing that his hero was actually the one that was committing the murders. And it's another one, like I said, very much like Pipe Dream, where it's a very sad ending. I just love the whole thing about comic books and comic book stores. There wasn't a lot of stuff like that when I was a kid in movies and television. It's a great episode with great effects and a heartbreaking ending. Will always be one of my favorite, if not my favorite episode of the entire series. Love Tales of the Undead.
Yeah, the show was just a huge part of my childhood, and I really wish it would have gone on longer. But it's been a lot of fun just going back and revisiting these episodes and talking about them here. I think season 2 is a really, really good season, and lots more to come. And I'm curious what people think about this series. Do you guys like the way I've structured it? Again, I'm trying something new, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of television series. So this is kind of the inaugural episode. Please give me some feedback if you like the way I'm structuring it, if you think I should do it a little bit differently, you like more insight into each of the episodes instead of sort of a short summary with my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would love to hear from everyone. Appreciate all the input, and thanks so much again for dropping by the Horror Zone channel. I hope everyone's doing well. I'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy, stay scared as always. Peace. Hey, my fellow Fright Fiends, I just want to thank everyone for supporting BoogeyMan Ben's Horror Zone. If you haven't yet subscribed and you'd like to, please hit the subscribe button down below. Click the bell notification so you're updated every time I drop a new video. I try to drop a video at least once or twice a week. The Horror Zone is a passion of mine, and it really makes me happy that I can share that passion with all of you guys. Thanks so much again for the support, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy. Stay scared as always. Peace.